I still remember the sound more than anything else. Not shouting, not crying, just silence. The kind of silence that falls when a room full of people suddenly decides you no longer exist. I was standing there, in a place that was supposed to feel safe to me, my fingers clutching the edge of my bag like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else looked away. No one said my name. And then my daughter did. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She said something so final, so dismissive, that my body reacted before my mind could. My knees went weak. My mouth went dry. I felt heat rush to my face, followed by a cold that spread down my spine. In that moment, I wasn't her mother anymore. I was an inconvenience. People I had known for years avoided my eyes. A few stared at the floor. One person gave me a look of pity so sharp it hurt more than anger ever could. I wanted to speak. I wanted to explain, but I didn't even know what crime I was being punished for. My daughter stood there, calm, composed, untouched, while I felt myself shrinking in front of everyone. This was the child I had built my life around, the one I had chosen over my own dreams, the one I defended even when I shouldn't have. And now, in front of witnesses, she had stripped me of my place. I remember noticing strange details, how loud the clock sounded, how the air felt too thin, how my hands wouldn't stop trembling. My chest hurt, not sharply but deeply, like something was tearing apart slowly inside me. I searched her face for something, confusion, regret, a flicker of doubt. There was nothing, just distance. That was when the thought hit me, heavy and terrifying. This didn't happen suddenly. This had been coming for a long time. As I stood there, humiliated and frozen, one question kept echoing in my mind, louder than the silence, louder than my heartbeat. How did sacrificing everything for my daughter lead me to this moment, where she chose to erase me? Before that day, my life had followed a single, unwavering direction, toward my daughter. From the moment I knew I was going to be a mother, everything else became optional. My ambitions, my comfort, my sense of self, they all moved quietly to the background. I told myself that was what love was supposed to look like. If she was safe, if she was happy, then I didn't need anything more. I built my days around her needs. I learned to survive on broken sleep and unfinished meals. I postponed plans, turned down opportunities, and slowly stopped being asked what I wanted. It didn't feel like loss back then. It felt like purpose. People used to tell me I was strong, that I was devoted. I wore those words like a badge of honor, even when my body was tired and my heart felt stretched thin. Every sacrifice felt temporary because I believed I was investing in a future where we would stand side by side. She was my world, and I made sure she knew it. I defended her when teachers complained. I justified her behavior when relatives raised concerns. I told myself that loyalty was more important than being liked. If anyone had to take the blame, I took it willingly. I believed that one day she would understand what I had done for her. For a long time, she needed me, or at least I thought she did. As she grew older, something shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, just small changes that were easy to explain away. Shorter conversations, less patience in her voice, a tendency to sigh when I spoke, as if my presence itself was exhausting. I noticed, but I didn't confront it. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up, they pull away. Independence can look like distance before it looks like maturity. I clung to that explanation because the alternative was too painful to consider. Still, there were moments that stayed with me. The way she corrected me in front of others, the way she made decisions without including me about things that affected both of us, the way she spoke about her life as if I were a chapter already finished. Each time, I swallowed my discomfort. I didn't want to be the difficult mother. I didn't want to push her further away. So I adjusted myself instead. I spoke less, I asked fewer questions, I learned to wait for scraps of attention and told myself that was enough. Trust doesn't break all at once. It erodes quietly. I ignored the warnings because I believed history mattered. I believed love had memory, that years of sacrifice created a bond that couldn't be erased by impatience or pride. Looking back, I see it now. The subtle distancing, the emotional withdrawal, the quiet rewriting of our roles. But at the time, I was still holding on to the image of the daughter I raised, not the person she was becoming. I had no idea that while I was protecting our bond, she was already learning how to live without it, and worse, how to live as if I was the problem. The betrayal didn't arrive with a warning. It slipped into my life disguised as routine, hidden inside a decision that was presented to me as already made. I remember standing there, listening, nodding automatically, not fully understanding what I was being told. My mind lagged behind my ears, as if my body knew something was wrong before my thoughts could catch up. At first, I didn't even recognize it as betrayal. I told myself she must have had her reasons, that maybe I didn't have the full picture yet. I had spent years explaining her actions to myself, smoothing over sharp edges, translating her silence into something harmless. So when she finally told me what she had done, my instinct was to protect her, even from my own reaction. But the more she spoke, the heavier my chest felt. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't confusion. This was planned. She had made choices that directly affected my life without consulting me, without warning me, without considering what it would cost me. She spoke as if the consequences were mine to deal with, not hers to carry. There was no hesitation in her voice, no apology hiding between the words. I waited for one. It never came. Instead, she spoke with certainty, with confidence, as if this outcome had always been inevitable and I was simply late to accept it. That was when denial started to crack. I asked myself whether I had misunderstood, whether I had misheard something important. I replayed the conversation in my head again and again, searching for a softer meaning, a kinder explanation. I wanted there to be another version of the truth, one where my daughter hadn't just pushed me aside so easily. But reality doesn't change just because you're not ready for it. The moment that broke me wasn't loud, it was subtle. She looked at me, not with anger, not with sadness, but with impatience, as if my pain was inconvenient, as if my reaction was an obstacle she needed to get past. That look told me everything. In that instant, I understood that she had already emotionally separated herself from me long before this conversation. What felt sudden to me had been slowly prepared on her side. She had made peace with the fallout before I even knew there would be one. My stomach dropped. My hands felt cold. I realized I was gripping the chairs so tightly my fingers hurt. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to remind her of everything I had done. I wanted to say her name the way I used to, when it still meant something to both of us. But the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere deep down, another truth was forming, one I didn't want to face. She didn't see me as someone she owed honesty to anymore. I had gone from being her support to being an obstacle, from being essential to being replaceable. And the worst part was realizing that she felt justified. As she finished speaking, I nodded again, out of habit more than agreement. My heart was racing, but my face stayed still. Years of putting her first had trained me well. But inside, something shifted. The story I had been telling myself about our bond, about loyalty, gratitude, shared history, began to fall apart. And in the quiet after her words settled, one terrifying thought took root. If she could do this so easily, what else had she already decided without me? After that conversation, nothing felt stable anymore. On the surface, life continued as usual. People spoke, days passed, responsibilities demanded attention. But underneath it all, a constant pressure began to build, like something heavy sitting on my chest that never lifted. I was living inside unanswered questions, and every small detail seemed to confirm that I had only seen part of the truth. I started noticing things I had ignored before: conversations that stopped when I entered the room, messages that were answered vaguely or not at all, decisions being discussed after they were already finalized. It felt as if a version of my life was happening without me, and I was only allowed to see the results, never the process. I wasn't included. I wasn't informed. I was expected to adjust. At first, I blamed myself. I wondered if I had been too soft, too trusting, too willing to step back. I replayed every interaction, searching for the moment where I should have pushed harder or spoken louder. But guilt didn't bring clarity. It only deepened the confusion. The emotional distance grew. She became careful with her words around me, measured in a way that felt unnatural. When I asked simple questions, her answers were brief, rehearsed. There was a new defensiveness in her tone, as if she was guarding something fragile and didn't trust me not to break it. That's when the fear set in. I realized how dependent I had become, not just emotionally, but practically. My life had been shaped around her for so long that pulling away now felt impossible. Every option I considered carried consequences I wasn't prepared for. Walking away wasn't just painful, it felt dangerous. I was trapped between needing answers and being afraid of them. The more I observed, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about one decision. Patterns emerged, boundaries shifted without discussion. My role in her life was shrinking, quietly but deliberately. I felt myself being pushed into a corner I hadn't agreed to enter. Sleep became difficult. My mind refused to rest. At night, I lay awake, replaying moments from years ago, wondering if the warning signs had always been there. Each memory felt like a clue I had missed. And then came the subtle confirmations. A comment made casually by someone else, a look exchanged that wasn't meant for me, a piece of information I learned by accident, not by honesty. Each one tightened the knot in my stomach. I wanted to confront her again, to demand clarity, to force the truth into the open. But every time I considered it, I hesitated. I was afraid of what I might hear, and more afraid of how easily she might dismiss me. The power imbalance was undeniable now. She had control over information, over decisions, over the narrative being shared with others. I felt reduced to a version of myself I barely recognized, quiet, cautious, uncertain. What hurt the most wasn't just the secrecy. It was the realization that my feelings were no longer a factor in her choices. I wasn't being protected, I was being managed. And in that growing silence between us, one thought became impossible to ignore. If I didn't uncover the full truth soon, I would lose more than just her trust. I would lose my place in my own life. The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined. There was no dramatic build-up, no raised voices at first. It began with a simple question, one I had been holding back for days, afraid of what it might uncover. My voice sounded calm even to me, but inside I was shaking. I needed clarity. I needed her to finally tell me the truth without filtering it. She didn't like that. The moment I stepped outside the role she had assigned me, the quiet, compliant presence, her expression changed. Her patience disappeared. The warmth I kept hoping to see never returned. Instead, I was met with a sharpness that felt practiced. She spoke as if I was unreasonable for asking, as if my confusion was a personal flaw. Every sentence felt designed to shut me down rather than explain anything. I realized quickly that this conversation wasn't about understanding, it was about control. I tried to remind her of our history, not in a dramatic way, just enough to ground the moment. Years, sacrifices, the bond we were supposed to share. But she brushed past it all, uninterested, detached. That was when she said it. One mocking line, casual, dismissive, that reduced everything I had given into something small and embarrassing. It wasn't shouted, it was worse than that. It was said with confidence, like an obvious truth I should have accepted long ago. Something inside me cracked. I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Anger mixed with grief, disbelief mixed with shame. My heart pounded, my face burned, and for a moment I couldn't speak, not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood how little they mattered to her. She wasn't listening. She was winning. The conversation turned colder after that. She became firmer, more assertive, outlining boundaries I hadn't agreed to and consequences I hadn't chosen. She spoke as if the future was already settled and my role in it was minimal. I realized then that this wasn't a misunderstanding that could be fixed with better communication. This was a deliberate repositioning. She was rewriting the relationship, and I was expected to accept the new terms without resistance. I pushed back, gently but clearly. For the first time, I refused to back down immediately. I told her how this was affecting me, how lost and displaced I felt. I didn't accuse, I didn't attack, I just told the truth. Her response was silence. Not thoughtful silence, not emotional silence, but the kind that signals disinterest, the kind that tells you your pain is no longer relevant to the conversation. That silence hurt more than the mocking words. In that moment, I reached my breaking point, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was finally awake. I saw the imbalance clearly now. I saw how long I had been shrinking myself to preserve a connection she was already prepared to abandon. As the conversation ended, I knew something irreversible had happened. I hadn't just lost an argument, I had lost the illusion that love alone could protect me. And as I walked away, one realization followed me, heavy and unavoidable. If I didn't change something soon, she would finish what she had started, and I would be left with nothing but the ruins of a life I built for her. I didn't expect the turning point to come quietly. After that confrontation, I withdrew. Not dramatically, not to punish her. I was simply exhausted, emotionally drained in a way I had never experienced before. I stopped initiating conversations. I stopped trying to explain myself. For the first time in my life, I chose silence not out of fear, but out of self-preservation. That's when something unexpected happened. A message came from someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, someone who had no reason to interfere. At first, I almost ignored it. I was tired of confusion, tired of half-truths. But something about the timing felt deliberate, as if this message had arrived exactly when I was ready to hear it. What I read made my hands tremble. It wasn't an accusation, it wasn't emotional, it was factual. Details I was never supposed to see, decisions that had been discussed without me, assumptions that had been made about my compliance, my silence, my endurance. As I read further, the pieces I had been struggling to assemble finally began to align. This wasn't impulsive behavior. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was strategy. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Pain, yes, but also clarity. For the first time since this began, I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't filling in gaps with hope. I was looking directly at the truth. And the truth was unsettling. She hadn't just acted without me, she had counted on me staying quiet. She had assumed I would adapt as I always had. My sacrifices hadn't been forgotten, they had been calculated. That realization hurt more than anything else. But it also did something else. It broke the hold guilt had over me. For so long, I had questioned myself, wondered what I had done wrong, blamed my own softness, my own devotion. Now I could see clearly that my pain wasn't the result of weakness. It was the result of being taken for granted. I started looking back at everything through a new lens. The distance, the rehearsed answers, the confidence she had shown during the confrontation, it all made sense now. And with that understanding came a subtle but powerful shift. I no longer felt small. I no longer felt desperate for her approval. I felt grounded, quietly, steadily grounded. I didn't confront her immediately. I didn't reveal what I knew. I watched. I listened. And for the first time, I noticed how carefully she controlled the narrative around others, how selectively she shared information. The difference was this: I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. I began to reclaim small pieces of myself, my voice, my boundaries, my sense of direction. I sought advice. I gathered facts. I stopped assuming that love meant endless surrender. Somewhere in that process, I realized something that frightened and strengthened me. I had more power than she believed, more options than I had allowed myself to see. The balance had shifted, even if she didn't know it yet. And as I stood there holding the truth she thought I would never uncover, one certainty settled firmly in my chest. The next time we faced each other, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The truth didn't come out in anger. It came out because there was no longer any point in hiding it. When the moment finally arrived, it felt almost unreal, like time had slowed down just enough for me to breathe. I remember how steady my voice sounded compared to how violently my heart was beating. I remember noticing how confident she looked at first, how certain she was that she still controlled the situation. She didn't know what I knew. As everything unfolded, piece by piece, I watched her expression change. The confidence faded first, then the impatience. What replaced it wasn't guilt, it was panic. For the first time, she was forced to listen instead of dictate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. I laid out the truth calmly, clearly, and completely. Facts she couldn't deny, choices she couldn't reframe, consequences she could no longer avoid. The room felt heavy, the air thick. There was a pause so long it felt painful. I could sense the shift, not just in her, but in everyone who was present. The story she had been telling no longer matched the reality standing in front of them. She tried to interrupt me. She tried to redirect. She tried to minimize. None of it worked. The power she once held over the narrative, over my silence, was gone. In its place was exposure. Not cruel, not dramatic, but undeniable. Every carefully built justification collapsed under the weight of what had been revealed. I watched her struggle with the realization that she could no longer position herself as the reasonable one, that I wasn't confused, that I wasn't emotional, that I hadn't imagined any of it. The truth stood between us, solid and immovable. What hurt the most and healed me at the same time was seeing her realize that her actions had finally caught up with her. The authority she had assumed over my life evaporated in that moment. She wasn't in control anymore. I felt something unexpected rise inside me. Relief. Not because she was exposed, but because I was free. Free from self-doubt, free from guilt, free from the story that painted me as weak for loving too much. There were reactions I hadn't anticipated: shock, discomfort, silence. Some people looked at her differently now. Others looked at me with a mixture of understanding and regret. No one spoke for a long moment. I didn't need them to. The justice I needed wasn't loud. It didn't require punishment or revenge. It came in the form of recognition, the undeniable acknowledgement that I had been wronged and that my pain had been real. As the moment passed, I realized something else. This wasn't just the end of a lie. It was the end of my submission to it. I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded, whole in a way I hadn't felt in years. The truth had done what years of sacrifice never could. It gave me back my sense of self. And as I walked away from that moment, knowing nothing would ever be the same again, one final truth settled deep inside me. She had taken many things from me, but she would never take my dignity again. After the truth came out, the world didn't collapse. It went quiet. Not the painful silence I had known before, the kind that erased me, but a different one, a reflective silence, one that followed understanding. People needed time to adjust to a reality that no longer matched the story they had been told, and so did I. The consequences didn't arrive dramatically. They came slowly, steadily, in ways that couldn't be undone. Doors that had once been open to her began to close. Decisions she had assumed were settled were suddenly questioned. The certainty she once carried faded, replaced by something unfamiliar. Distance grew between us, not because I demanded it, but because it became necessary. For the first time, I didn't chase reconciliation at the cost of my self-respect. I didn't beg to be understood. I let the space exist, even when it hurt. And it did hurt. There were moments when I grieved, not just the relationship we had lost, but the one I believed we would have. I mourned the version of my daughter I had carried in my heart for years. Letting go of that image was one of the hardest things I have ever done. But in that loss, something else began to grow. I started rebuilding a life that wasn't centered around sacrifice alone. I rediscovered parts of myself I had buried, opinions, preferences, strength. I learned that love does not require erasure, that motherhood does not mean permanent silence. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting the truth without letting it define my worth. I stopped measuring my value by how much I gave or how much I endured. I set boundaries without apologizing for them. I allowed myself peace, even when it came with sadness. As for her, she was forced to live with the choices she made. I no longer protected her from consequences that weren't mine to carry. That wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Today, when I look back at the woman I was, standing humiliated, questioning her own reality, I feel compassion, not shame. She loved deeply, she believed fiercely, and she survived something that could have broken her. The story didn't end with reconciliation. It ended with self-respect. And that, I've learned, is a form of justice that lasts. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt erased by the person you gave everything to, subscribe for more real-life stories like this. Comment your thoughts or experiences below, and share this with someone who might need to hear it today.